Have you ever felt powerless because you don't have the title? You see problems around you that you could solve, opportunities slipping away that you could capture. But you think to yourself, if only I were in charge. And so you watch, you wait, maybe feeling frustrated, perhaps even resentful. Here's the belief that traps most people. Real change requires real authority. But you know what I've discovered after decades of working with people? Some of history's greatest leaders had no formal authority when they started leading, not a single position of power. Yet they changed the world. I call this the authority illusion, the mistaken belief that you need someone's permission to influence others. And here's the tragedy. The people waiting for titles, waiting for that promotion, waiting for someone to officially empower them, they miss their greatest opportunities to lead. What I'm about to share changed how I think about leadership forever. I learned something fascinating from Buckminster Fuller, the brilliant architect and systems thinker. He spent years studying how massive ocean liners navigate the seas. Now picture this with me. Imagine a ship weighing 100,000 tons cutting through the ocean. To turn this massive vessel, you need a huge rudder. Makes sense, right? But here's what fascinated Fuller. The rudder itself is too big to turn directly. The water pressure against it is just enormous. So on the edge of that big rudder, there's a miniature rudder called a trim tab. This tiny trim tab, maybe 1% of the rudder size, creates a low pressure vacuum when it moves. That vacuum turns the big rudder. And the big rudder turns the whole ship. Think about that for a moment. The smallest element determines the direction of the largest system. Fuller was so moved by this principle that he had 2 words engraved on his tombstone. Call me trim tab. This is what I call the trim tab principle. You don't need to move the whole organization. You don't need to change everything at once. You just need to find the right pressure point. And here's what I want you to consider. You may be positioned as a trim tab right now in your organization, your family, your community. The question isn't about your position, it's about your positioning. Now let me share a distinction that changes everything. There's a difference between your position and your positioning. Your position is the title on your business card. Your positioning is where you place yourself to create influence. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. And influence has nothing to do with titles. You see, there are 2 types of authority in any organization. Formal authority can command compliance, but it cannot command commitment. Moral authority, on the other hand, inspires voluntary followership through character and competence. I once worked with an organization where the most influential person was a secretary. No title, no direct reports, no budget authority, yet she influenced hiring decisions, shaped communication patterns, created the emotional climate of the entire office. How did she do this? She positioned herself as indispensable through service, wisdom, and consistent character. People with formal authority constantly sought her counsel. She was that organization's true trim tab. And here's the liberating truth. Every single person in an organization has positioning opportunities. I've seen entry-level employees change workplace cultures. I've watched team members whose questions shifted entire strategic directions. You don't need permission to position yourself as a leader. You just need to understand where your influence can create the greatest impact. Now let me share 4 trim tab positioning strategies. These aren't manipulation tactics. They're strategic choices about where and how you apply your influence for maximum organizational benefit. The first strategy is to position yourself as the living example of what you want to see multiplied. Model the standard, become the standard. Your behavior teaches more powerfully than any memo from the boss. When you see communication problems, communicate with excellence. When you see lack of initiative, take initiative on something visible. When you see low morale, bring authentic positive energy. Here's the positioning secret. You don't criticize the current standard. You simply embody a higher one. And here's what happens. Others will gravitationally move toward your standard because excellence is attractive. It draws people in. I once watched one person transform an entire team's culture simply through punctuality. She was never late, not once. Meetings started on time when she arrived. Within months, the whole team shifted. Not because anyone demanded it, but because she modeled a standard that others wanted to follow. That's trim tab leadership. Small, consistent, visible. The second strategy is to position yourself as the person who asks questions that shift direction. I call this the trim tab question. A question so strategic, it changes the course of the entire conversation. Now, you're not challenging authority here. You're expanding thinking. Listen to how these questions work. What if we looked at this from the customer's perspective? Have we considered the long-term implications? What would we do if we had no constraints? Who benefits most from this decision? You see the positioning power here? You're not forcing solutions. You're creating space for better thinking. One redirect an entire project. And you don't need authority to ask intelligent questions. The third strategy is to position yourself at the intersection of people, ideas, and needs. I call this the connector's advantage. You see, formal authority creates vertical influence up and down the hierarchy. But positioning as a connector creates horizontal influence across silos. Here's how you do this. Connect people who need to meet but don't know it yet. Translate between departments that speak different languages. Share credit generously. Become known as someone who makes others successful. Build relationships in all directions, not just upward. And here's the positioning secret. Influence flows through networks, not org charts. Make yourself the bridge. You become indispensable without needing a title. The fourth strategy is to position yourself as someone who sees around corners. I call this anticipatory leadership, leading by addressing what others haven't noticed yet. Now, this isn't about being smarter than everyone else. It's about being more attentive and proactive. Here's what this looks like. Notice the small problems before they become crises. Prepare resources before they're requested. Document solutions to recurring issues. Create systems that prevent problems rather than just fixing them. And here's the positioning power. Competence creates moral authority faster than anything else. When you consistently solve problems before you're asked, people start seeking your input. You position yourself as a leader without anyone officially promoting you. Now, let me challenge the assumption that's been holding you back. I need authority to create change. The greatest trap isn't lack of authority. It's waiting for authority to do what positioning can accomplish today. You're not powerless. You're positioned differently than you thought. I call this the permission trap, the belief that you need someone else's approval to begin leading. But think about it. Most people who change the world weren't given permission. They simply positioned themselves and started. Here's the shift. From I can't because I'm not the boss, to I can because I know where the trim tab is. Your current position in the organization may be exactly the right place to create leverage. Sometimes the most powerful influence comes from the most unexpected positions. So stop asking, when will I have authority? Start asking, where is my trim tab opportunity right now? So here's what I want you to do. Choose one trim tab positioning strategy for the next 7 days, just one. I call this the 1 degree shift. You don't need to revolutionize everything. Just create one small pressure differential. 1 degree of change in positioning creates exponential results over time. Here are your choices. Model 1 behavior you want to see become standard. Ask one strategic question in a meeting that shifts perspective. Connect 2 people or ideas that should meet. Solve one problem before anyone asks you to. Trust the trim tab principle. Small strategic actions in the right place move enormous systems. Remember Fuller's wisdom. The smallest element determines the direction of the largest system. You don't need a new title. You need a new understanding of the influence you already have. You're not waiting to become a leader. You're deciding how effectively to lead from exactly where you are.